Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange, and the host who might be Desire. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have once again found in my travels throughout the dream world. Today I wanted to talk about a graphic novel that I read, a sequel to one that I read a few weeks ago, one that's about dreaming and desire, and a vortex of dreams. Today I wanted to talk about The Sandman Volume 2 by Neil Gaiman, illustrated by Mike Dringenberg, Malcolm Jones III, Chris Bacallo, Michael Zulli, Steve Parkhouse, and introduced by Kelly Sue DeConnick. This one is The Doll's House, a title that I'm not really sure why it's called that, just because there is a doll's house, and Dream appears in it, in a like a singular panel, but it doesn't make sense why it's called that unless Dream is the doll and he's being manipulated by external forces. I'm not really sure. It doesn't really make sense within the context of the story. As from the cover, you can see Dream and someone working people like puppets. Again, this doesn't really come up throughout the story. I wouldn't say it makes sense, but it's there. It suggests that Dream is making people dance as he wishes, but he's not really that malevolent in this story. He does do some shady things, but nothing completely dark or anything like that. So not really making sense there. Overall, I will say I enjoyed this. I'm saying weird things now, but I enjoyed it. There are some flaws, and I'd love to talk about that. I mentioned before in my previous video about Neil Gaiman how he's a competent author, and he has a tendency to make stuff that makes you think, but he's also has a tendency to try to be as edgy as possible for reasons that aren't really clear, especially when you don't need to be edgy, and both of those are present here. Without further ado, let's talk about The Doll's House. I'll do a little summary without spoiling the end, do a little analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Sandman Volume 2 starts with a prologue, which is just an introduction by Neil Gaiman where he explains the plot of the first book. Nothing too special. It's interesting to see the plot of the first book written out because it's a very insane plot and very ridiculous. So to see someone actually write it out, it comes off like the scribblings of a clearly demented fellow, and that's done by Neil Gaiman. So also, before I move further, I just want to talk about how weird it is that the artist drew Neil Gaiman, or drew Dream to look like Neil Gaiman. It's very obvious. I'll put up pictures comparing the two because it's you can't not talk about this. Did Neil Gaiman request that? If so, why? And what kind of ego is that? And if he didn't request that, why are the artists doing it? It seems like a giant joke on their part. I'll probably have to explore that, look into it deeper, but I just wanted to point that out first. So, the story really starts, it also starts with the two members of an African tribe, an older man and a younger boy going through a rite of passage, talking about one of the myths of the tribe. And in the story, in one of the first civilizations, a queen, Nada, falls in love with one of the Endless, a dream, essentially, King Morpheus. However, she soon realizes that nature does not want them to be together. Her city that she rules over is destroyed because of their relationship. And despite the fact that they love each other, Queen Nada kills herself so that no further harm is done. Unfortunately, Dream follows her into the afterlife, and he begs to be with her, and she says, no, don't keep asking, because it's only going to hurt both of us, and I don't want to hurt you. And then he asks her a final time, but it cuts off before she can give her response. And the tribesmen say that she ultimately said no. However, the women of the tribe tell a different story. So it's interesting how that might not be the full truth right there, or maybe that the women manipulate the story to fit their needs. Either way, it's interesting, and it's really touching because of how it shows a different side of Dream's character. Then the story flashes forward to Dream and Despair talking. Desire and Despair. Desire and Despair are Dream's younger siblings, and they're talking about how Nada was their doing. Their machinations made it so that Desire and Nada and Dream really fell for one another. And they talk about plotting another scheme against Dream in the near future. And so that's pretty much what sets off the rest of the story. The story then follows Rose Walker, a young woman who is flying to England with her mother to meet Unity Kincaid. Unity is from the first story. I talked about how Unity was raped while she was in a coma because Dream was away from his kingdom, and so people had difficulty with their sleep. And so Unity reveals that she is actually Rose's grandmother and Rose's mom's mom. And so there's a happy family reunion there. Rose actually flies back to Florida because she learns about her missing brother Jed, and so she's searching for him and trying to locate him to really complete the unification of this family. She takes up in a boarding house in Florida and ends up meeting a strange man named Gilbert, who serves as her protector throughout much of this journey. Meanwhile, Dream is keeping tabs on his kingdom, trying to figure out what's what, and he notices that there's three missing dreams, so to speak, creations of his that he put in the dream world to mess with people or teach them something. I don't know. They're Brute and Glob. Sorry, four people. Brute and Glob, who have escaped. So sort of like ugly monster men. The Corinthian, which was a nightmare that he created to scare humans, and the Bowling Green or something like that. Just like a giant field that I guess is like where people have their dreams end. It's it's very weird. Like how can an entire place escape the dream world? Questions. So he sets out to try to find those things and before they can do harm in the real world. But Brute and Glob have attempted to create another dreamscape away from the real dreamscape, and in the process they've tried to create their own Sandman. His name is Hector. He's a dead superhero, and he exists in the mind of Jed. Jed, who is in Florida, is being held sort of captive by his foster parents in their basement. They're mistreating him, abusing him, and he resorts to sleeping to get away from the terror that is his real life. But Brute and Glob are, instilling terror in his mind, and so this causes Dream to intervene and kill off Hector because he was already dead, so he's just making nature right again. And then killing Brute and Glob by locking them away in a darkness dimension where they can't do any further harm. Hector's wife is part of the dream world too, and she was pregnant. She wasn't dead though, so he let her out of the dream world, but he told her that her baby that she's carrying actually belongs to Dream, so he's going to come claim that baby later on, which is really weird and kind of a very bad guy kind of behavior on Dream's part, kind of showing the morphing nature, the Morpheus, if you speak, the morphing nature of his being. Jed manages to escape, but he's picked up by the Corinthian, who when he's hitchhiking, and the Corinthian has been shown to be a bit of a serial killer at this point, so it's not looking good for Jed. At this point, there's a side story where Dream meets and befriends Robert Gadling. He's a 14th century peasant, and he's going on about how he doesn't want to die because death is not for him. And so Dream and Death grant his wish and say, meet me here in 100 years at this tavern, and we'll talk about if you want to die or not. And 100 years later, Gadling is like, oh yeah, living is pretty fun. I don't want to die. Let's meet here again. And they keep meeting over the centuries, where his fortunes go up and down. Gadling loses his money, loses his wife and child. He gets into the slave trade, which he later realizes was a mistake. And he eventually realizes that the reason Dream keeps coming back is because Dream is very lonely, and he needs a friend, and Dream is put off by this. But 100 years later, like, Dream shows up and is like, oh, of course I wouldn't keep a friend waiting, which is very, like, an awe moment, I guess, like, very weird in this comic of death, but it's very charming and, like, endearing to Dream to see such an interesting story be told, and I don't think it really comes up anywhere else throughout the story. Gadling doesn't seem to be connected to what happens at all throughout this, but it's an interesting diversion, I guess. So the Corinthian shows up to a serial killer convention at a convention hall, where all the serial killers are meeting and talking about how they love to do the murders, and for a variety of reasons. Rose also shows up there to find her brother Jed with Gilbert, and in the process, one of the serial killers follows her and tries to do the serial killing, and she manages to summon Morpheus with the help of Gilbert, and so he takes care of the serial killer, putting him in a dreamlike state, and then he confronts the Corinthian and is like, I created you because I thought you would be great in the dreamscape, but you escaped into the real world and you became somewhat of a cliche. Like, you showed the humans what they already knew. Like, you didn't try anything different. And he manages to vanish the Corinthian into another blackness dimension where he can't escape. And he punishes the serial killer for their serial killing ways, which I feel is fair on his part. And then Rose manages to find Jed, and while he's in the hospital, she has a dream where she becomes a vortex, or is like in danger of destroying the dream world. Now, what happens then? That's near the end of the story, so I'll let you find that out on your own. I recommend you check out that the end of the story there. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the analysis section. So in terms of analysis, one of the things I like about this story is that there's more depth to Dream, King Dream, Morpheus, that character. You see a little depth to him in the first volume, Nightmares and Daydreams, where you learn that he's a bit cocky, a bit of a proud, endless one, and he focuses on, like, he's kind of distant from humanity, but he's also endeared by them. And he's also a bit lacking confidence at the time because, dreams, things have changed in the years that he's been imprisoned. And he needs a little help with that self-doubt that he has going on, which his sister Death is more than willing to help him with. So you see somewhat of his character there, but you see even more of it here. You see how he seeks out friendship because he doesn't really have that. As an endless one, like, there's no one really similar to him except for his siblings, and they're constantly trying to bring him down in some way. So he values any friendship that he can get, as evidenced by Gadling in the side story. He's also big into love, despite the fact that Desire interfered and made him fall for Nada. Like, it seemed like that love was real, and it's possibly because he's lonely. Like, he falls even harder for people. So there's that in his life, and along with that, he has to make a lot of hard decisions. Like, he's very conflicted about killing Rose Walker because he knows that he has to do that. He ends up not doing that for a bunch of really weird reasons. But he knows that he's going to have to, and he doesn't want to, because he's only allowed to kill kill one person, and that person is whoever becomes the vortex over the generation. So it's a hard decision, and he really doesn't want to have to be the one to make it, but he's King Dream, so that is his decision. And so in making these hard decisions and seeking out friendship, you learn more about Dream and how he's a very interesting and fascinating character. And like I want to read more just because I want to find out more about Dream and his wants and desires out of life. Not to sound like a cliche, but another big theme of this the story is humans' cruelty towards one another, or man's inhumanity towards man. You see that with a lot of the characters, the monster characters in this story. You may say, the Corinthian and Brute and Glob are dream creations. They're monsters. So the real villains are the monsters of this story. But Brute and Glob are only able to do their work on Jed's mind because he escapes to the dream world to avoid dealing with his abusive foster parents. So his abusive foster parents really allow Brute and Glob to really create that separate dream world in order for them to undermine Morpheus. Another example is Corinthian. Like he was originally created as a nightmare, but he escaped into the real world and he started becoming a serial killer. But even the Corinthian isn't the worst of them all, because he shows up to a serial killer convention and there's so many bad people, so many people who are willing to do harm to other humans, murder other humans, and cause sadness and grief. So the Corinthian really isn't that special, and if anything, he's inspired by the worst that the other humans do to each other. An interesting quote comes up from the book here that I'll read to you. So this quote comes from when Dream confronts Corinthian while he's giving a speech. He says, "You disappoint me, Corinthian. You and these humans you inspired and created disappoint me. You were my masterpiece, or so I thought. A nightmare created to be the darkness and the fear of darkness in every human heart. A black mirror made to reflect everything about itself that humanity will not confront. But look at you. 40 years walking the earth, honing yourself, injecting others with your joy of death, and what have you given them? What have you wrought, Corinthian? Nothing. Just something else for people to be scared of, that's all. You told them that they are bad people out there. You told them that there are bad people out there, and they've known that all along." So what I'm getting at there is like Dream is is saying like you've inspired serial killers to go out and do bad things, but humanity has kind of already known that there's darkness lurking out there. So the Corinthian isn't really doing anything original. He's just he's a bit hackneyed, and he's just killing for fun, and he's not what Dream originally intended when he created something like the Corinthian. Which I find interesting, because humans know that there's badness out there, and they know that there's cruelty, and I guess you could say it's even crueler that they don't attempt to stop it. But I don't think Gaiman is really going that far there. But there are some things that I don't really like about this graphic novel, and that's that Desire shows up, but she plays no real part unless she's interfering with what's going on between Rose Walker and Dream. Like, she doesn't seem to exist outside of the beginning of the graphic novel, where she's talking with Despair and talking about how she wants to just ruin Dream's life. It's implied that she played a part in getting Unity Kincaid pregnant, but why? Especially because Unity Kincaid was unconscious, and it would only become a factor later that Rose Walker would be born and would become the Vortex. So Desire seems to be playing the long game, but without any real anything that makes sense about that. It's pretty confusing, and I don't think Desire is a very good villain or even a good character if they're not trying to be a villain. Another issue with this is that besides saving Jed and trying to stop the Vortex, what is even the point of this story? There doesn't seem to be a lot going on. No real point. Like the Vortex seems like this all-consuming thing, but Dream doesn't kill Rose Walker. He kills Unity Kincaid because she sacrifices herself to save Rose, and it's very confusing, why that was even necessary in the first place. If Rose was the vortex and she didn't need to die at all, like if it could just be passed on to anyone else, why didn't she pass it on to one of the serial killers and like they could have died? I don't know. It's very weird, and like if Dream has to do this every generation, it's a weird sort of responsibility to kill someone who you could very easily save in different ways. So the plot doesn't really sit well with me. It feels kind of weak compared to the first volume. And the last thing I'll talk about is, again, the violence towards women. In the first story, in Nightmares and Daydreams, I mentioned how it felt really weird to just say that like Unity Kincaid was raped, especially because it didn't seem like her character was going to be influential later on. And she is to some degree. I still don't think saying that she was raped is justified. But this story has a lot of violence towards women as well, in that the serial killers talk about perpetrating violence against women because of how it makes them feel or how it gives them a sense of power. And some of the serial killers say, not all of us appreciate doing violence against women. Some of us are serial killers for other reasons, but that's a really weird thing for Neil Gaiman to write. And I don't feel like, because comics have that whole thing about showing way too much violence against women and kind of leaning on it as a crutch. I feel that's the same here. It doesn't need to be there. It feels a little overused here, and I'm not going to give Neil Gaiman a pass on this. I'm going to keep mentioning it every time I see it because it just seems like it's too much, and it's especially given this was 1989 where this was happening, all the time. It's kind of not excusable anymore. Those are my thoughts on the Doll's House, Sandman Volume 2. I would say that I did enjoy this. Maybe not as much as the first volume, but there were parts that I definitely loved, like about the Corinthian and Robert Gadling and Queen Nada. Those aspects of finding out who Dream were are definitely interesting, even if the main plot isn't necessarily what I'm looking for, even if it even makes any sense. It's still somewhat interesting, I guess. So I do recommend it. If you're reading the series, definitely check this one out. I can't, once I get further in, I can't say I really recommend it or not, because who's gonna just start reading the second book, without reading the first? But yeah, so I liked it. If you read this before, leave a comment. Let's talk about this. It'd be interesting to hear other people's perspectives on The Doll's House and Neil Gaiman's writing. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this specific volume, and we can get more thoughts on it from other people out there. Follow me on Twitter at AroundTheWeird so that we can talk about various Twitter stuff and books and movies and whatnot. And in the meantime, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and desirable travels. Farewell.